First things first, it's kind of divided into three sections. The chapter that you have two chapters that come out of, basically are how diseases spread and some of their toxic effects, and a fair amount about antibiotics, and then back to the epidemiology and how basically we get infected and how they spread to us. So there's really two sections. It kind of starts with one a little bit, then antibiotics and antibiotics, antivirals, etc. So there's 55 questions for your viewing pleasure. The last 5 are true, false. All the rest are multiple choice. You have to know your difference between toxins. There's endo and exotoxins. Okay, exotoxins are the way most bacteria do damage. They produce a variety of substances that can cause any kind of damage. They can affect the nervous system, neurotoxins. They can affect the blood, hemotoxins. They can affect the GI tract, very common for food poisoning, entero, which means the enteric or the GI tract toxins. All of those are a different way, and it can affect any organ or anything like that. The difference is endotoxins, ENDO, are only produced by gram-negatives. And they're so gram-negatives can produce exotoxins of their own, but only gram-negatives can produce endotoxins. That's that lipopolysaccharide layer. And the usual response with that is can be as severe as systemically undergoing into shock. So it can be very, very severe. Most diseases, if they're respiratory diseases, typically they're spread respiratorily. GI diseases, fecal to oral, sexually transmitted diseases usually are passed that way through intercourse. They usually affect that system, the genitourinary tract. So in general, okay, that's how things are spread. And every disease to some extent facilitates the spread. So GI diseases give you diarrhea, and then that's more likely to get on your person, on your hands, and then spread to other areas or surfaces that you come in contact with, people you are working with. Respiratorily, coughing, sneezing, all of those kinds of things, shedding them from your skin, might pick them up on your skin. So very often it's what they affect is kind of how they spread. The difference is, are they direct or indirect? So I got a bad cold, I'm coughing, you're right next to me, and I'm coughing all over the place, and you're unfortunately standing next to me. That's direct and it's probably respiratory. Okay? The other hand is, I'm on my phone, you don't see me, I'm coughing, and obviously, I forgot my phone, I've got to call so-and-so, could I borrow your phone? Now I hand it to you, and if I didn't think, or didn't mention to you, hey, I've got a really terrible cold, maybe you want to use somebody else's phone, now you can get you can still get a respiratory disease, but indirectly, because now in between it is what's called a fomite. If we were clever, a phone mite. An on-the-spot, clever remark, and all of you just look at me like, thanks. So fomites, F-O-M-I-T-E-S. So the same thing, if someone's working with food supply and they contaminate the food, then you eat the food, that's indirect by way of the food supply, okay? As opposed to them, you're coming in directly in contact with them, getting it on your hands, from shaking hands with them and putting it in your mouth. Now that's much more of a direct contact. If something is in between it, or any type of inanimate object or surface is in between it, then that's an indirect contact. The difference between endemic and epidemic. Things that are endemic are always with us, they're always present. Measles and chickenpox, the cold, are always present. So they're endemic, they're something that there's always a certain number of those cases that are consistently found almost throughout the year or statistically relevant, even ones we have vaccinations for. The disease is still present, would reoccur if it wasn't for the vaccination. Where an epidemic, it takes a disease that's normally present and has an unusual statistical increase over a period of time. Something that was not anticipated. So we know, like right now, with influenza, how many cases you're supposed to have. Relatively speaking, there's probably a late season flu epidemic right now. It's not as horrible, no, but that's a statistical thing. Now, when would that be significant, depending on the severity of the disease, how virulent it was, how many people were really getting sick, was anybody dying from complications? Those are measures of virulence, how rapidly it spreads, how nasty it is, how sick you get, are people potentially permanently hurt by it, do people die as complications. Those are all how short or long the incubation period is. All of those are various measures of virulence, sort of the nastiness index. We really get in trouble on a planetary basis, worldwide, what you worry about is something crossing an ocean. So, I mean, most of us feel that HIV and AIDS started probably in Africa, but now they have made their way across all of the world, effectively. So that effectively they went from being endemic, then epidemic, and now that word we use when it crosses from continent to continent is pandemic. And we judge these in terms of mortality and morbidity. Morbidity just signs of the illness, and the implication would be pretty significant signs. You know, morbidity index would not be like a runny nose, but it might be a severe rash, it might be high fever. Those are morbidity signs. Mortality rates, and I mean, they're not. We sometimes erroneously think of them the same, but that's not the case. Let's see. Which brings us, after a little starting area, that brings us next into the antibiotic category. Should you know the definition of antibiotics? Antibiotics are produced by microorganisms like bacteria or mold and have properties that either kill or inhibit the growth of other microorganisms. So by microorganisms against microorganisms, that makes them an antibiotic. When we tinker with them in the laboratory, whether it's as simple as getting a side chain for ampicillin or as complex as making a fourth generation cephalosporin, they're called semi-synthetic, partially synthesized, meaning they're partially made alive. Okay, bactericidal versus bacteriostatic. Simple and important. Bacteria. You don't want to paint with a broad brush and say that only bactericidal drugs are good. Bacteria, you just have to look at the definition. Bactericidal agents kill bacteria. Bacteriostatic agents stop their reproductive cycle. What that means is that, what's implicit for that, is that when you stop taking them, theoretically that cycle could begin again. But you're anticipating that your immune system and other body mechanisms will clear that problem from your constitution. Whether it does or it doesn't, that's a different story. That's why most of us prefer bactericidal as a first-line choice, given the choice of whether it's bactericidal or bacteriostatic. They both work in the presence of resistant organisms or not. Some are you have broad-spectrum members and narrow-spectrum members on both sides of the aisle. So there's a big overlap, but the definition is very specific as to their mechanism of action. And the ones, fortunately, that do that the most, are the ones we use the most, penicillins and cephalosporins, these cell wall antibiotics. They are by definition bactericidal. If you can destroy the cell walls, so that's penicillins, cephalosporin, vancomycin, the big three players, which you would have to know in this category. They're all bactericidal. They're desirable. Ciprofloxacin, which is in the family of the fluoroquinolones. That's a big family. It's been around for a while, but when Cipro finally came out, and my wife calls it Cipro and Kelsey, in her nursing days it was Cipro, not Cipro. So it indicates that that is also a bactericidal agent. That's why it gets a lot of play, particularly for urinary tract and other infections. Very useful against gram-negative, more so than anything else. So there aren't, and after that, there aren't a lot of the others that really are bactericidal. Most of you, if you remember that short list, and some people think Sinercin, which is an antibiotic that's relatively recent, is sort of manufactured for MRSA, is the two agents act, when they act together in concert, for bactericidal. The answer, if you have a question, is bacteriostatic for just about the rest of them. Okay. So let's see what else. Selective toxicity. So there's selective toxicity. The two other terms are selective toxicity and half-life. Selective toxicity very simply means more toxic to the microbe than the host. Anything that we take that's going to be therapeutic by implication, okay, and we measure that, and effectively we measure selective toxicity by way of therapeutic index. The terms, to a certain extent, I wouldn't say are interchangeable, because the therapeutic index would have to the higher it is correlates to selective toxicity. So they're not interchangeable. We use them to denote similar properties. So what does it mean? That it measures selective toxicity, indicates it's more toxic to the microbe than to the host. That makes it therapeutic. How do we rate that? By calculating either the therapeutic index, which is a ratio, 9 to 1, 10 to 1, 50 to 1, or the safety margin, the difference between the toxic dose and the dose we commonly use. The farther apart they are, the safer it is. Because if people periodically take stuff wrong, either accidentally or intentionally, and then that's what we really have to consider. Half-life. Half-life has different definitions in different sciences. From the biology, life science sphere, is the amount of time an organism, us, takes to break down half of the dosage. It doesn't say deactivate it. It doesn't say render it harmless. The implication is that it does that. It's the amount of time it takes for half the dose to be changed in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes those changes still have activity. Okay, but so you have to understand. So we say metabolize or break down is the way it's explained. And there are a lot of agents that are designed to have active metabolites, active breakdown products, which prolongs their ability to be useful. Allergies and adverse effects, and side effects. How do they differ? The question is, what causes them? So a typical side effect, and almost all the side effects when we talk about antibiotics, it's all skinny and not here. Oh, I have that effect on try getting a coffee, of course. I used to say to you, don't you guys have to use up all that money that you this time of year? Perfect time. No sugar. Latte. One single shot would be fine. No sugar. No additives, regular.
You want to teach us that?
No, I'm just trying to work the room for drinks. It's all right, I'm not going to give you anything. Trust me.
We'll see.
I don't want it from you. You're blowing off a week anyway.
Yeah, but like I have 2 weeks when I get back.
Yeah, please. Where was I? Oh, we did half-life. Oh, I'm losing my place. Adverse effects. So most of the adverse effects, GI, gastrointestinal, constipation, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, rectal bleeding, you name it. They're most of the time antibiotics. The principal site for adverse effects is the GI tract. It can irritate the tissues. It can be problems with absorption. It can damage the lining that's there. All of those are possible. Those are not allergies. Allergies, we typically see rash, we see fever, we see swelling, we see difficulty in breathing because they're very inflammatory in nature. And the reason is they're due specifically to the unusual or excessive activation of your immune system. So by this time in anatomy and physiology, most of you have you've gotten your way into the immune system, so you know what that's all about. There's a lot of chemicals that are released, and that's what and most of the time it manifests itself. Hives, swelling, rash, even difficulty breathing, all the way to anaphylactic shock. They both could be deadly. I mean, somebody could an older person or baby could die from prolonged vomiting and diarrhea. In fact, it happens with some degree of regularity, unfortunately. So you can't paint with a broad brush. One's not necessarily worse than the other. Okay. The big problem again with antibiotics, what they do is they clobber the normal bacteria, and that allows other bacteria to overgrow, like C. diff. That's an overgrowth that occurs. damages the line